Hello, everybody. We'll be starting in about 15 minutes. I'm just gonna, you can sit tight and just kind of share a screen for you and we'll be back shortly. Are you on? Oh, I know what I was gonna write. Can you imagine? What do you see? Hello and welcome, everybody. Just want to let you know we'll be starting the Zoom meet and greet in about 5 minutes. So thank you for joining us. Please hold tight and we'll be starting soon.
Hi, Matt.
Hello, Gary, and hello, everybody. I've got 7:30 on my watch, so what do you say we go ahead and get this party started?
All right.
All right, it's nice crowd we got here today, and I want to first of all just welcome everybody to our Zoom meet and greet. Whether you've seen him before or this is your first time hearing Gary speak, I know you're going to enjoy listening to him and him sharing his heart and sharing his wisdom and sharing his experience and just his plan for making Hawaii a better place. Again, this is Gary Cordery, candidate for governor of the state of Hawaii. My name is Matt Martinson. I'm a volunteer with the campaign, and I will serve as tonight's moderator. We hold these meet and greets regularly, so we've been doing various different topics. Tonight will be a fun topic. Tonight is a topic, can you imagine? Can you imagine a better Hawaii? Of course, we all have been hurt. We have all felt the strain. We have all felt the struggle living in Hawaii, not just the past obviously the past couple of years, but over the past decade or two, things are getting tough here. For you, it might be the high cost of living. Or like it is for me, maybe your kids are moving to the mainland because there's better jobs there. Maybe you're a farmer and you're being restricted by government policies. Or maybe you're a small business owner and you're struggling with high taxes or government regulations, whatever that is. Those are the things that make us hurt. They make us struggle. And yet we're searching for answers. And tonight you'll get to listen to Gary talk about his plan for Hawaii and how to bring hope, because we truly are looking towards Gary to making Hawaii a place where we can thrive once again. So again, I'm looking forward to the conversation we're about to have. Our format for tonight, Gary will speak for about 25 or 30 minutes. And then after that, we're going to open up for question and answers. And please feel free to ask any question you want. And then at the end of the evening, we will wrap up with a few closing comments. All participants are going to remain muted throughout the evening. You're welcome to ask questions or comments, but all you need to do is just type them into the chat. I will be moderating those, and I will ask the questions to Gary. We'll try the best we can to get, I'll try my best to get to all of your questions. Just to let you know, we appreciate all of your comments. However, if anyone does use inappropriate language, you will be removed from the meeting. By joining this call, you've also been automatically enrolled in receiving emails about and updates about the campaign, and those you may opt out of at any time. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Gary. Gary Cordery has spent the last several years working hard, just fighting for us, for our liberty, against unjust policies. And I've watched him the last several months really dive deep into what makes our government what it is. And I'll sort of leave it at that, because we know it's not right. It's not great. And we need changes. Gary is a family man. He is not a politician. He's a Hawaii business owner. He's a man of great faith in God, and he's an honest, humble, and passionate leader. He's spent countless hours, as I mentioned earlier, researching issues, and really wants to bring honesty, truth, and righteousness to our islands and to our government. And Gary's desire is truly to represent you. And so again, your thoughts, your comments are really encouraged tonight. Again, I want to thank you for joining us. And with that, I will turn the evening over to Gary Cordery. It's all yours, Gary.
Thank you, Matt. What a great introduction once again. You're such a gift at this. It's amazing. And just a pleasure to be on. I just want to thank all of you who are on the call and joining the call. There'll be a number of people continuing to get on the call as we spend this time together this evening. And I'm very grateful. We all know that the primary election is right around the corner. And it just brings a certain element of urgency and responsibility to our democratic process here, where people have the unique opportunity to actually select those who govern them. This is rare in this world that we live in. And so first of all, I just want to thank you for participating in this Zoom call. I know that this is a part of the decision-making process for each of us to make a decision. Well, not me, I know who I'm voting for, but for each of you to make a decision who you might consider as your governor. And obviously we're talking about the primary at this point, but I honestly believe, and I'm quite certain that we'll be the governor in November. But so this evening is an important evening, and I'm very grateful that you're on the call. And alluding to what Matt had shared earlier, we do a lot of these calls every once a week, and we do lots of meet and greets and opportunities to meet with various people and voters. I don't really call people voters. They're people who vote. And so we meet with people around the state via the Zoom call or in-person meetings. And we spend a lot of time in these meetings talking about the various issues that we're facing as citizens in the state. And oftentimes these conversations can get bogged down because of the nature of our, the condition that we're living in. And so tonight I wanted to change it up a little bit. We'll have to talk about those for have some contrast. But I remember even when we announced our candidacy in late February, the prevailing piece was that there's a breath of fresh air and that hope was on the way. Because in reality, what I discovered in the process of making the declaration to run is there is definitely a vehicle and a process that we can actually transform the way our government functions. And if we transform the way government functions, we can begin to change and address the numerous problems that we've seen decade after decade here in Hawaii. But to go into a little bit of background on how I actually came to make the decision to run, as Matt mentioned, I'm not a politician, and I'm a family man. I've been married to my bride for 41 years. Kim, we have 2 adult daughters, which, by the way, they're here visiting for the duration of the primary, which is a super blessing for Kim and I, Rachel and Erica. And we have 7 grandkids, and obviously our 2 daughters are married to these fantastic young men. So these are the primary and most important things to me, and they actually were the reason why Kim and I got involved in if you will, a political sphere when the COVID, I call them the COVID years, but when those came, when those mandates came from Governor Ige, I recognized right away that these mandates were not accurate. I started hearing these language about essential and non-essential, and the mask was safe and effective. And so we actually started this campaign with another group of people, the Aloha Freedom Coalition, and it was really a stand for the people to have liberty, that government should not force people to do something against their will, in particular a medical shot that it was neither a vaccine, it's not a vaccine, but the government was mandating this, and we knew that was not correct. And so we stood for this. And in reality, I remember the first time we were at downtown at the Square House, I remember in my heart thinking, I'm 62. In fact, I turned 63 yesterday, was my birthday. We had a great celebration. But I remember saying in my spirit, and actually I made these declarations that at my age, I could get by. I could eat peanut butter and jelly and get by, but not my grandkids. My grandkids should not grow up in a society where there's tyranny is commonplace, and where we would struggle as citizens of the state with so many problems because we have so much corruption in government. And I knew in my heart that stand was non-negotiable. And so that declaration to start and work with AFC led to a number of people over the second half of the COVID years, and I'm calling them the COVID years. People began to say to me, you should run. You should run for office. You should run for governor. And I would literally hear these comments, and I would dismiss them outright as fantasy. I'm a contractor. I was working hard. We have families. We have a number of men work with me, and we have people in the office, and they have families. And there's a great deal of responsibility when you're a business owner. I don't carry business like that. I carry my business as family. And so I dismissed these outright until finally I was in my backyard, and really I had this profound experience with the Lord. It happened once, then it happened a second time. And at the end of the second time, I realized that these comments that were being made by by people in the community. They were actually related to what I was experiencing with the Lord. And I couldn't put my finger on it. It wasn't the kind of thing that you can just identify like, oh, this was a worship experience or something like this. It was profound. And it actually, I was actually, I was actually not so much shocked, but I just really didn't have a real good sense or a handle on what was going on. But then somebody had made a statement at a worship group that we have on Tuesday night. And I knew when that statement was made that it pierced me in such a way that I knew that this decision to run for governor was an act of obedience. Now, wherever you're at in the spectrum with regard to who you are before the King of Heaven, that's where we are as people. For me, I'm a Christian. We should be really clear about that. I base my life and the principles of my life, the principles of my company are found in the Bible, the biblical principles, and they're like gravity. They govern everybody. They're honesty, truth, promise, accountability. These are kingdom principles. And so whether a person actually recognizes them as being kingdom principles or not, they govern all of our lives. They're like gravity. They're the nature of healthy relationships, or the nature of being responsible citizens, understanding who you are, understanding what authority is. And so these principles govern my life. And so I realized that this act of obedience was part of being a son of the Most High God. And so I actually sought the Lord a couple of weeks later. I actually sought him about the idea of running for governor, where up until that moment, it had been like, oh, I think God is saying something. So after I sought him, I knew. And I said, yes, Lord, okay. And so I went in and I told my wife, I said, honey, I think the Lord is telling me I should run for governor. And to be honest with you, and I've said this before, I think that was my last attempt at a back door. Back door is when you know you're supposed to do something and you keep a little back door so that if you don't really want to do it, you have an excuse to get out. And so I shared this with my wife, Kim, and she said, yeah, that's right. So there goes my back door. So this process to make that decision really happened then. I asked her two other questions. The second question was, and probably the most important question, because Kim and I do things as one. I don't make decisions like that without her agreement. It's a way to honor. It's a part. Once again, this is a kingdom principle. Nevertheless, I said, honey, are you willing to risk everything and not win? Because people will risk. They will risk. You will risk everything if you know at the end of the day you're going to win. But if you take a risk and you risk everything and you don't have the promise to win, then you're operating in a different paradigm completely. And she said, yes, I'm willing. And so that night, and Susie's on this call tonight. I called Susie and I said, Susie, can you pick up a couple of lays? I'm going to make an announcement tonight. And that's how this campaign started. It really wasn't a long, thoughtful process of, oh, I should run for political office. It really was not. And so the first thing I just sought the Lord and I said, Lord, I'm not sure what to do. I've made this declaration. He says, I want you to seek wisdom. And so I went and I bought whiteboards at Fisher, Hawaii. I put them up in my living room and I started writing down names of people I thought who might be able to offer some wisdom on what it means to be a governor, to how to run for government. And I started working my way through these lists of names. Each phone call was about an hour and a half long, just asking, simple questions. In the middle of the second day, continuing on with these questions, I was outside my office in Halava and I asked this question and this lady said to me, she said, Gary, she said, it's not that you can win a popularity contest. She said, the issue is, can you govern? And I knew when she said that, the way it actually struck me, it almost went through my body again, because I began the sobriety and the magnitude of the declaration I was going to run for governor became very sobering in that moment, because I really realized in that moment that up until that point, the previous day, and even in that morning, people had said, well, if you want to win an election in Hawaii, you have to raise lots of money and you have to get name recognition. This is politics in Hawaii. And I knew when she said, it's not a popularity contest, it's can you govern? I realized in that moment that everything needed to change for me. And so there was a paradigm shift in my spirit, in my heart, about what it meant to govern. And I also realized at that moment that I did not know. So honestly, I went home and I'm on my laptop right now. And this thing, I went home, I set my laptop on the computer, and the most rudimentary things, I said, what does the governor do? That may sound crazy after you make an announcement that you're going to run for governor. But literally, to understand what it meant to run for governor was to understand what the governor does. And so these questions I began to wade into on my computer. What authority does the governor have? What authority doesn't the governor have? How does the governor relate to the legislative branch or the judiciary branch or Congress? And as I began to wade in, just taking time to carefully, thoughtfully read about the governor's role, his responsibilities, his authorities, I began to realize why in Hawaii we have so many difficult and systemic problems. What I began to realize by the end of the first day, literally by the end of the first day, I knew why we were stuck. And may I just share with you, we are stuck. And when I say stuck, what I mean is that you can take this list of problems that we see on every candidate's website: cost of living, cost of housing, healthcare, homelessness, education. You can take that same list that's on everybody's website and you can stick it on the same website from the previous candidate from the last 3 or 4 elections. It's the same list. We are stuck. Our state, our people are stuck and unable to resolve issues. And what I learned at the end of the first day was the reason that we're stuck is because the governor of Hawaii is the most powerful governor in the nation. People that when I realized that and I began to tell people, they had no idea. Most people do not know that your governor and my governor, Governor Ige here in Hawaii, has the most authority than any other governor in the nation. And the reason for this great deal of authority and power is because our governor in Hawaii nominates nearly every position in government that makes all policy that runs our lives as citizens. This is a staggering reality when you think about it, when you contextualize what I'm saying. And more importantly, because he has so much authority and these people, and the state has been run by the Democratic Party since Linda Lingle, they basically have the same policymakers and the same agenda each change of each governor. And so the policymakers don't change and the agenda doesn't change. The only thing that changes is a couple of the names of the people at the head. And so when the Lord told me, I want you to run for governor, he told me clearly, I want the horn. This is what he said. I'm just telling you, these conversations that I have with you, they are just totally unedited and honest. This is what I promise you as governor. What we long for as a people is we want governor. What I want as government, as my governing authority, I want the people who I put there by my vote to tell me the truth. I want responsibility. I want accountability. I want transparency, and I want the truth. And this is why we can't get anything done. Here in Hawaii, we have systemic corruption. This is what I learned by the end of the first day. And in particular, why corruption is never dislodged in our state is because our governor selects the attorney general. So think about this short list that I'm going to give you. Only in Hawaii is it like this. The governor in Hawaii selects the attorney general. He selects the sheriff's department. He selects the judges, less the Supreme Court. These judges in turn select the ethics commission. And the governor also selects the Office of Elections. So think about it. Those agencies that I just mentioned, those are the very agencies that are supposed to bring accountability to government. So you have the fox watching the chicken coop. This is what we have in Hawaii. There is no accountability in government because it's structured that way. This is why we can never move and get off of these problems. This is why we can never make headway in dealing with these issues that I alluded to a few moments ago, because they haven't changed. The only way they change is in the area of priority and how they're impacting the society. In certain elections, education is the most important. They're on people's mind. In this particular election, it's probably the cost of living or the cost of housing. But the underlying piece, the reason that we cannot address any of these is because of the systemic corruption that we have in Hawaii. Because unless the people are engaged in their republic, in their state's government, you will never have the influence of the people making changes in government. And that's what we have right now. More than 50 and sometimes 60% of the people who are eligible to vote in Hawaii do not vote. This is a shame. Why don't they vote? You know, when we first started this campaign, the first place we went was the very first place we went as a campaign stop was Lanai, of all places. We took a team and we flew to Lanai and we met with 8 people. Our team was half as big as the group that we met with. But what we heard in Lanai is the same thing we hear on every neighbor island. And we would ask the question, are you voting? Well, no, we're not voting. Well, in fact, I've never voted. And we would ask this question, why don't you vote? The answer, almost without exception, why bother? My vote doesn't matter. My legislatures don't pay attention to my vote, so why should I bother? Nothing ever changes, and this is the issue that we have, and this is why we can't address any of these things. So when I started this conversation a few moments ago, the declaration that we made, because we did a soft declaration that I mentioned earlier, but then a month later, as we went through the election process and understanding when you can actually make a public declaration, a lawful one, that was in March. So between February, when we did a soft announcement, and the actual public declaration of our candidacy, what I stated was help is on the way. Because help actually looks like policy change. What's required in Hawaii is, as I mentioned earlier, the governor in Hawaii, not only does he nominate those officials that I mentioned a moment ago, but he also nominates 192 directors and deputy directors. And at the end of the day, under these administrative teams in these various departments that the governor has responsibility for, and direct oversight and budgetary oversight, he's responsible for almost 10,000 people. These directors and deputy directors are the heads of the agencies and their staffs, this 10,000 people, the massive administrative staff that consumes the wealth of the people. These agencies are the ones who are directly responsible for making policy that determines every aspect of our lives in Hawaii. So when you think about this, we're just going to talk for a moment about one of the various ones. And there's basically 3 primary agencies that are the umbrella pieces for most agencies. All the other ones, a lot of them fall under these, but they're the Department of Health, Department of Land and Natural Resources, and the Department of Education. Under these 3 main agencies, the governor selects the director and the deputy directors, and then they build these teams. Within these teams, once they're established, these agencies, and there's lots of them, there's Department of Ag, there's tourism, there's the Port Authority, there's airports, everything you can imagine has an agency and a staff related to it. But the way the government functions, and I'm just going to go here for a minute, then we're going to open this up for questions because you'll understand how we're going to make changes. Because it's not worth our time, it's not even worth my time to run unless I'm absolutely clear and that you have confidence that yes, it is possible to have change. Without that absolute confidence, understanding that I, as an example, actually understand and there is a pathway that we can make change in the policymakers. We're not executing and talking about changing the legislative branch. That would be nice, right? We currently have representatives and senators and the state legislators. They make law. The legislative branch makes law and tax policy, and they allocate resources. This is basically their primary job. On the other hand, policy is done in the departments. So it works like this. Let's just take the Department of Health as an example, but they all work the same. The Department of Health, with its director and its deputy director, they come to a conclusion about what the policy is going to be for FY23 as an example. So they start with a budget from FY22, which, by the way, they never go back. The budget system in Hawaii is they take the previous budget and they add to it. So they come to a decision, they come to a decision about what resources they believe they're going to need to execute Department of Health policy over all of the citizens in the state of Hawaii. Doesn't matter which island you live on. It is Honolulu centric. It covers all the islands and it's within this department. They decide, and so let's just play this out. Let's just say that they decide we need $1 billion for FY23. It's actually more than that, but let's use $1 billion for fun. They and the other departments, they send this budget request to the governor's office. The governor's office reviews these requests. He has an office of management and budget. They evaluate these various budget requests from the various agencies, all of them. They come to a determination, they based on their own analysis, are we going to have enough tax revenue to fund all these requests? They decide, okay, fine. Let's just say that they decide it's all good. They move it on to the legislative branch. They pass it from the governor's office to the legislative office so that the legislators can rubber stamp it and decide whether or not it's reasonable. And once they come to the conclusion that the $1 billion that was requested by the Department of Health, which, by the way, they do not cut. They don't have to cut because they're not spending their money. They're spending your money. They take the $1 billion and they allocate the money back to the Department of Health. And once they've done that, once they've made that allocation, they're done. The legislators are done. It's almost like this. Did our job. At that point, that $1 billion is like carte blanche within the departments. The departments, they take that resources that was allocated. It was first affirmed by the governor's office, submitted to the legislative branch. Legislators they talk about it. They allocate the funds to the Department of Health and the others. And at that point, they decide what policies are going to receive what resources and how they're going to be implemented into our lives. In this process, this is where we have corruption. This is why all of you hear of these things like the general fund as an example. All of you know that in this past election, that this past legislative session, there was an extra $3 billion in the general fund. Well, where did this money come from? Whose money is this? This is your money. This is the taxpayers' money. The government, I can tell you, the government's job and what the government does, it does not produce a single thing. Government does not produce, the legislative branch does not produce anything. It consumes. What does it consume? It consumes the wealth of the people. It consumes your tax money. It consumes nearly every available dime that's out there is consumed by the government. It's put into the general fund for allocating to these agencies. But when the allocations were all done this past legislative session, there was still $3 billion left over. Now you may know, and you may be very excited that Governor Ige has made a kind offer to the citizens of Hawaii, and I'm a bit of mockery here. He's offered and he's going to give all of us taxpayers back $300 each. I told my wife, this is fantastic. I can fill my car with gas 3 times. And I'm supposed to feel good about this. What happened to the other $3 billion? This goes into private projects. It just falls through the cracks and there's no accountability. There's no accountability in the taxpayers' money. There's no transparency. You do not know where your tax money goes. And yet, we're the highest tax state in the nation. Our baseline is 11%, California is 13.3%. But what you don't realize is the legal administration has authorized these agencies, the departments, to actually add fees and regulations as though they're law. You must pay them. And so you wonder, what are you talking about? What kind of fees? Well, when you want to register your car, my wife just got her car recently, $500 to register her car. This money is supposed to go to fix the roads. Anybody remember this? Your tax money? Did you know that 82% of the Department of Transportation goes to the administration piece? 82% to administrate fixing your roads. And these things just come up when I'm talking. So I may bounce here around a little bit, but I want you to know that the way that we're going to make change is we're going to nominate new people. We're going to nominate a new director. We're going to nominate new deputy directors. And the criteria for their position will not necessarily be primarily, are they good at the specific task, what's required? The criteria will be, do they have integrity? Do they understand that they're spending the people's money? We can train people tasks. It is much more difficult to train integrity. But if you're going to allocate $1 billion to an agency and there's no accountability, I can tell you when it gets to the agency, there's zero accountability. You have no say. So we are going to nominate new directors and new deputy directors, and this is going to be rough. I'll be honest with you. These directors, they'll have to be confirmed by the Senate. Some of the deputy directors will also have to be confirmed by the Senate. So we will have to be very proficient and have good strategy to bring these people forward in front of the public's eyes, to nominate them, to make sure that the public realizes this is exactly who it is and they're perfectly suited for this job. And when we have these pieces in place, when the people are like, yes, we should have Matt, he should run the Department of Health. Now, probably not Matt, but we could say, let's just say it's Matt for the conversation's sake. We say, we think Matt is the best thing since peanut butter and jelly. And we tell the entire state, Matt's the man. And we tell the state, Matt's the man until they love Matt. And then we're going to take Matt and we're going to submit him to the Senate. And we're going to say, not only is it my choice as governor, as the director of Department of Health, but guess what? The people think he's the best man. And we're going to find headway in making policy change in nominating directors, in nominating judges, in nominating Department of Education directors, in nominating Supreme Court justices, which, by the way, you should be very excited. In the first term, and the next governor's first term, he will have the opportunity to nominate 3 state Supreme Court justices and 3 Department of Education directors. We will transform. When I say we are going to transform and redirect the policymakers in this state, not only will we have the opportunity to redirect the policymakers, but we will have the chance to put in place judges who will affirm the Constitution. So when there's bad, unconstitutional behavior by legislators and other entities that want to push agendas on the people of Hawaii, they will be subjected to judges who understand the Constitution and what liberty is for the people. No longer will the judges simply affirm the governor's agenda, because this is exactly what happened in COVID. There were many lawsuits brought asserting that the governor did not have the legal authority to keep reissuing the 60-day order. He does not have that authority. The problem, he picked all the judges. And so when these cases came before the court, the judges just deferred to the governor's prerogative. And this is what you have. This is why you have systemic corruption. So you'll notice the picture that I've painted is this. We will begin to illuminate from the top, because we will push for, as governor, that these 5 pieces, Attorney General, Sheriff, Office of Elections, and judges shall be elected by the people. They should never be nominated by a partisan politician, whether it's me or somebody else. This kind of power should not be in the control of a single person at the head of the state. This is why I say, we want the horn. We want to change the culture of corruption to a culture of integrity and honesty and accountability to the people. We are supposed to serve the people. And this only happens when the people trust those who they've put in government. So we will begin to illuminate, and we will use the Attorney General's office. We will open an ethics office, and we will prosecute. We will not just talk about what everybody else talks about. You notice when we had the rail, how many of you know, Matt, you help me with time, right? You help with time? Okay.
Yeah. You can wrap it up in a couple of minutes. Go ahead and make your last point and we'll get to questions.
Thank you very much. We could go all night. Notice what we had with the rail. You had a tremendous amount of corruption, and what do all the politicians say? Well, we should have an audit. Let's audit, as though having an audit is going to do a single thing. Does anybody really think that there's going to be a prosecution when they find out that there was mismanagement of funds? Of course not. We live in Hawaii. It's acceptable behavior because we live in a culture of corruption. So when I say we must deal with corruption, we cannot address the cost of housing, the cost of living, the education. We cannot address healthcare until we've addressed the corruption piece. And so this will happen simultaneously. So in the first 180 days of our administration in Hawaii, the first thing that we will do is we will eliminate all the mandates right off the bat. The 60-day mandates are going to be gone. We will also initiate the process through the new Attorney General, whom I've already talked to somebody. We will initiate the process of trying to understand and implement and promote the idea that those offices should be elected by the people. We will also implement and put in place this office where we will begin to prosecute corruption in Hawaii, because this idea of pay to play must go away. Hey, that rhymes. Pay to play must go away. I like that. Did you get that, Sheila? So I can tell you, there's a great deal of hope for the people, because once we address those, then we can actually start to look at these structural pieces. And there are, and you should ask me questions about how we're going to bring the cost of living down. I can just say, and I'm going to end with this. We're the highest tax state in the nation. We have the highest and worst business climate in the nation. We have the worst school performance data, and yet we spend $15,000 per student in the nation. We're in the bottom 4 year after year after decade. We have the highest per capita homeless population in the nation. And yet we have billions of wasted dollars. The misappropriation of your resources is corruption. You might think that I'm talking about just the backroom deals. Yes, we have those too. But when I say corruption, I'm referring to the fact that you have all these resources that are not allocated to fix problems. And so until we deal with that piece, you cannot fix the problems. So I'm going to close with that, Matt. And you should be encouraged. I'm creating a context where you can actually say, wow, it's this way, but it could be this way. This is what I hope for. My kids left this state 4 years ago. My kids live in Utah. My grandkids live in Utah. They're born and raised here. My grandkids were born here. This should not happen. Elderly folks in Hawaii should not lose their homes because of property tax. That should not happen. And why is it corruption? Because there was an extra $3 billion. And I can tell you, up to this time, tax revenues in the state from 22 to 21, now 21, there was $3 billion left. Tax revenues are up 30% over the $3 billion. There's corruption. So let's open this up. Matt, thank you. I look forward to, and you can ask me any question, by the way. I look forward to these conversations, so thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Yes, we've already got some questions coming in on a number of topics, some of which you've touched on. And so again, if you've got a question in your mind, if you just type it into the chat box, I will put it together. And please forgive me, because sometimes we have different questions that are similar to each other. So I might try to combine them to be a little bit more efficient with our time. You talked about cost of living and tying it in with economic sustainability. Somebody wants to know, how can you help make Hawaii more self-sufficient amidst food shortages, production shortages, and our dependence on mainland items?
Okay.
Imports.
Great question. I'm gonna try to. I tend to run these answers really long, so I'm going to try to abbreviate and bring them a little narrower focus. Sustainability in Hawaii, we hear this year over year. We need to get away from being dependent upon the tourism. Everybody's heard this. It's a given. We must get off the tourism dollar. The reason that we have such an addiction to the tourism dollar is because it's the easiest way for the state to generate resources. They can apply general excise tax 2 or 3 times. But by the way, general excise tax in Hawaii is a regressive tax. In other states, they have sales tax. We have what's called general excise tax. The only problem with general excise tax is right now it's 4.7%. But it's applied to every transaction on every import item that comes into Hawaii. So by the time this 4.7% gets to you as a consumer, it's 3 times that. It's nearly 15%. This is why the largest portion of revenues in this state is general excise tax, and it's regressive. And one of the things that we will do, and it's somewhat related to the question, is we are going to eliminate general excise tax on food and medicine in Hawaii. We're going to take it off. It does not need to be here. It's people cannot afford it. We don't need it. It's regressive, and it shouldn't be right. In addition, we will actually remove and put, and this is going to be a state tax issue. We will remove the excise tax on family practitioners. We have a shortage of family practitioners in Hawaii, and everybody thinks doctors make a ton of money. They do make a fair amount of money, but they pay an incredible amount of money in taxes, and they're bound by unbelievable regulations. And in Hawaii, big health. So the Queens Medical Center, Pacific Health, Kaiser, these big health organizations are consolidating power. They're consolidating the base, and they somehow have nonprofit status. Why would they want to be? Why are they nonprofit? Because nonprofits are exempt from general excise tax. I've talked to doctors. We had a doctor on this program that opened up this program a couple of months ago. She shared with us that the reason most family practitioners do not stay in Hawaii is they cannot make money. And the reason they can't make money is one of the reasons, the 5% that they pay, because it's an unequal playing field. And I can tell you in Hawaii, we must have equal justice, and we must have equal fair access to the marketplace. Corporations should not get preferential treatment over family business, over small business, and they do. We must have a local ag industry once again. It wasn't very many years ago, maybe a decade and a half ago, when Hawaii had a robust ag industry. Most of you on this call remember Medigold Dairy or Foremost Dairy. Most of you, if you do, I'm sure you do. Most of you also remember that we had beef, we had poultry, we had produce. We have none now. We have a small, and it is a burgeoning industry, but relatively small, mostly found in open markets and in private small chains, but they're not found in Safeway. They're not found in Costco. They're not found in Times. We must, through DLNR, change land policy. DLNR and Department of Health have constrained the ability for the small farmer to make a profitable business. They've done this through lease regulations. The small farmer in Hawaii must be allowed to own their property. They cannot take a leased property and pour all their personal finances, their time, and their treasure into a property where the state is going to put that very property up for lease for the highest bidder. And this is exactly what they do. There are some carve-outs. The Department of Ag has some programs where they're giving long-term leases. But to bring local industry back, we need the government to enhance the possibility. We must change in Hawaii the way the Department of Health handles its resources. And Department of Health's oversight is over land and water. DLNR, land and water. Department of Health is water quality and food quality. So what's happened? If you're a farmer or a rancher, you cannot bring your product to the marketplace efficiently and profitability because Department of Health has these regulations requiring so many regulations that they cannot actually do this in an equitable manner. So these are changes that need to happen. These changes came by way of stakeholders outside the state, large ag, Monsanto, all of these big companies. They came in, they brought these laws to the legislators. The legislators enact, they call the departments enact policy, they generate regulations, and all of a sudden you don't have any local industry anymore. And so what we've done is we've traded local industry for Costco. This is bad policy. So when I said to you when we first started, we need new policy makers. We need policy makers who understand that the state of Hawaii is only utilizing 5% of the land. And I'm going to end with this. And ag property in Hawaii is already designated. It's ag property is designated 1, 2, or 3 by how the quality of it is, the accessibility. But in Hawaii, because it's more profitable Department of Land and Natural Resources has been rezoning ag property and giving it to solar farms for tax credits. Now, last time I checked, you cannot eat a tax credit. We can give, do we need solar? Of course we need solar. Should it be put on the side of a hill? Yes, it should. Should it be on the prime ag land in Hawaii? Take Waipio as an example, right next to the freeway. 500 acres of prime ag land, DLNR rezoned it and made it possible for a large solar industry come in there and put a solar farm on there. This is what I'm talking about when I say corruption. So we must bring local industry back. In addition, we should bring back a goods and services ferry so that a local farmer who creates a product and maybe on North Shore of Oahu wants to take it to the Big Island, he can use a non-profit ferry to do this rather than Young Brothers. He cannot make a profit if he has to use Young Brothers. So we create the space, we use tax incentives, or we just remove the burden for them to be in business, and then we create them a transportation piece where they can actually have a thriving market. So long answer. There's no easy answers here, Matt. Sorry.
No. Thank you, Gary, for a very thorough answer. And ladies and gentlemen, his abbreviated answer can't be done because he's got so many ideas, so many thoughts going through his head. It's so multifaceted. So I appreciate the fact that you've gone through so thoroughly. There's a number of questions here that are related to homelessness. I know you've talked about homelessness and your plan on dealing with it and approaching a homeless problem. There's a number of things on just housing them and drug testing people who are welfare recipients or limiting the amount of time people retain social services. And then a related question regarding illegal immigration. So how can you put that together into a solution for Hawaii?
All that in 30 seconds. No,
I'll give you a minute.
The problem with homelessness in Hawaii is, first of all, it's ran by the Department of Health. The Department of Health sees homelessness as a problem. The issue that faces Hawaii is an assessment issue. You have more than one type of group or one more type of people that are on the street that we call homeless or houseless. The problem is the state of Hawaii does not know who they are or why they're there. This is the problem. Some of the people are on the street because there's been a bad set of circumstances. Somebody's lost their job. Maybe they wouldn't take a COVID shot. They lost their job. Maybe there was a divorce. Maybe there's a death in the family. Maybe there was a severe injury or something like that, and they've lost their job. For whatever reason, they couldn't make their rent. They couldn't make their mortgage, and they find themselves on the street. Those folks need help from the state. This is what social services are for. These people do not want to be on the street. They recognize that this is a short-term deal. They need to get back on their feet, and we need to help them. There are people who are on the street that, quite frankly, would prefer to live on the street. We talk to these people. You probably know people who talk to these people, or maybe it's you yourself. My friend talks to this person. She said, "Why? Don't you ever want to get off the street?" And the person said, "Why would I get off the street? You feed me every day." These people are quite capable of working, and they must work. The unending, unregulated social services program, we have the most generous social services program in the nation. There must be an end date. They cannot just continue to use these social services to live. They must engage in work. Honestly, it does not matter to me what they do, but they must participate in the welfare of a society. And so I'm not sure what the exact date is. Is it 90 days? Is it 60 days, 90 days? But that time, that duration of those services, those free giveaways that you're underwriting with your tax money must come to an end. They must work. This is a biblical principle. Then there are those folks here that they're on the street and they have a lot of mental health issues. They have drug addiction issues. There's a lot of vets on the street. These people need an accurate, honest, professional assessment. And one of the things that I've been thinking about is why not use the School of Medicine and actually create a system from them and let them use facilities, state-owned facilities that are already unoccupied, set up these assessment centers, bring these people in and actually assess their actual needs. Don't just give them a food stamp and say, get on your way, be good, you're on your way. My friend does this in California. She said that 25% of the homeless people in California have schizophrenia. A simple pill is taking care of 25% of the people on the street. How do they know this? Because they have professional assessments. This is how they know that. So there's a bit of a dilemma. There's a constitutional dilemma. You cannot tell a homeless person that we're going to commit you to a facility because mentally you cannot do it. They have civil rights. At the same time, you also have loitering laws, where you have people in businesses downtown urban Honolulu, and you can't get into your business because somebody's sleeping on your doorstep and they're using your door as a bathroom. This is a very difficult issue. But if you actually treat people with integrity and honor, and that they're a gift made in God's image, and you assess them honestly, and you provide a system so that they can actually get well, this is the pathway to move forward. And then the folks that Pat mentioned, they come here with a one-way ticket and a list of social services. They're not the same as immigration, by the way, but it does happen. There are states who do this on a regular basis. Those folks need to go home. The Attorney General in this state must get with the Attorney General in those states, and there must be consequences. And these folks need to go home to their families. Honestly, just because the state wants to push them onto another state and their social service program does not serve the individual. They need to go home to their families and to their communities and need to get well. We need the nonprofits back in the social service industry. Whether you know this or not, but only a few years ago, the state made it almost impossible for the local church and nonprofit to serve the homeless community. This is insanity. You have people who have a heart of compassion and they want to serve, they want to help people, and the state says no. This is bad policy. Why do they do this? Because there's federal funds connected when the state does it. Mm-hmm. If the private sector and the church does it, the state doesn't get the federal funds. This is corruption. This is about money. And so finally, the immigration piece, whether you know this or not, but President Biden, there are planes flying into Honolulu now. And they have immigrants on the planes coming in here at night onto military bases. And these folks are being released into our streets with social services and a one-way ticket. This is, well, I can only tell you what some of the other governors are doing. They're putting them on buses and they're driving them up to Delaware. I don't know what we're gonna do in Hawaii. I really don't. Until we have a new president and we have new immigration service policy, I'm not sure what we're going to do, but I'm telling you, they're out there.
Can we send them to DC?
Out of DC, yeah. So this is a problem I haven't actually thought through yet, for those of you who asked this question, but it must stop. Mm-hmm. We do not have the ability, the natural resources, the monetary resources, the sewer capacity, the water capacity, the energy capacity. We have none. We're already taxed. We are maxed out, and we cannot continue to take more citizens who are going to come and live off the resources of the people. So this is going to be we have some difficult things to resolve.
Thank you, Gary. Next question. This is a philosophical one. What will you do if a bill passes your desk that conflicts with your Christian beliefs?
Example.
Well, I don't see an example in the question.
Okay, I'll answer the question then. So first of all, it should be known, I'm not running for pastor of the state. So, I mentioned in the very beginning that there are biblical principles. There's Judeo-Christian values. Our entire justice system is based on these values. Our Constitution and our Bill of Rights are based on these values. Everything about our country was based on these values. These values resonate for me. I'm a constitutionalist. I believe in the Constitution. I believe in liberty. I believe in your personal freedoms and your civil rights. Those are the governing pieces of a state. It is the governor's primary responsibility to uphold the United States Constitution and the state of Hawaii Constitution. That is his primary job. His job is to provide that kind of leadership that provides equal justice, safety, and security for the citizens of the state. If the question is about, and I think the question, because I hear this question on a regular basis, if the question is about abortion as an example, It's a topic in our society, and rightfully so. There's been this big, the Supreme Court just overturned Roe versus Wade and gave that responsibility back to the states for the citizens of those states to determine their own counsel and directive to the legislators on how the legislators should handle that. I would say that that's not a thing that we have here right now. My hope is that we will have a balanced legislative branch where you have Republicans and Democrats, not just all Democrats. But to finish the thought, if in our state we have enough Republicans, and they decide, and the people decide that they want to turn over the lawful abortion in the state of Hawaii, and that bill comes to my desk, I'll sign it. Because I believe life has not, the ability to decide and determine what is life has not been delegated to man. Life is a gift from God. He made us. He knows the number of our days. And when I pass from this life to next, it will be his timing. It's not my authority. Now I'm speaking personally now. It is not within man's authority to determine life and death.
Thank you, Gary.
So.
Great answer. Some questions about the cost of housing and cost of living, particularly housing. How will you lower the cost of housing, and how can you keep foreign entities from buying Hawaiian land?
Good questions. Cost of housing in Hawaii, I can tell you, there's two general rules of thought. The most fundamental and common sense is that we have an issue of supply and demand, but we're a destination state, which is a bit of a caveat in that conversation. But in Hawaii, once again, I talked about DLNR. DLNR has the responsibility to actually govern the lands so that there's enough land made available for housing in Hawaii to accommodate the people who live here without them having to fight for the last few scraps that's left. And that's exactly what we have. We see skyrocketing housing because there's not enough capacity. There's not enough available houses or places to live so that the price keeps going up and up and up. And this is the problem. So DLNR must change. What did I say? The policymakers must change with regard to how housing land has been made available. And this includes, by the way, a couple of caveats that will make a big difference. One is Hawaiian homes. Hawaiian homes, there's thousands and thousands of Kanaka Maoli, the Hawaiians who've lived here for generations, that cannot get onto their land, and they're driven into the private marketplace. Why don't they own their land? This is something that we will pursue. Why 50% blood quantum? This is something else we will pursue. We will go to the Department of Interior and we will push until we have an amendment to Department of Hawaiian Homelands so that the people of Hawaii will own their land. And then we will bring together the stakeholders with the resources to develop these lands. Think of it. Hawaiian Homes, OHA, Bishop Estate, Kamehameha Schools. These all share the same declaration to preserve the culture of the Hawaiian people and to provide for their well-being. I'm just summarizing. We bring these people together and let them underwrite the infrastructure, and we give the Hawaiian people their own land. How is that even possible? It's almost an oxymoron to say we'll give them their land. This is their land. I'm pretty angry about this, as you can tell. Mm-hmm. It's unjust. This is a kingdom principle, justice. And so these people who have been waiting for their land some 10, 20, 30, 40 years, and they never get their land, while this government consumes the wealth of them, they get federal resources for Hawaiian homes. You want to know why they don't get their land? Because there's allocations come from the federal government to Hawaiian homes. And then they collect the lease money and they don't provide the land. The people should own their land. And the other piece, the cost of housing here, and I haven't mentioned this for a while, but the cost of construction in Hawaii is there's no purpose, there's no reason, there's no There's no tangible reason to say why the cost of construction is so high here other than bad policy, bad land policy, bad management of the land policy. And now the individual counties are also adding their own regulations. And I can tell you one of the issues, the people of Hawaii, there's going to be some sober conversations and there's going to be the truth. When I talk to you about the truth, we talk about homeless and housing and developments that are for maybe they're low income developments. You know, honestly, I'm just going to be honest for a second. The people of Hawaii, not in my backyard. The people of Hawaii have to own and account for the fact that this is their neighbor. We must love one another, and we must make space for these developments to happen where it makes sense. Not out on the side of somewhere that's undesirable. It's not the quote blue chip property. The people of Hawaii must exercise enough grace towards each other to say, yes, in my backyard. And I'm not talking about encampments. I'm talking about legit, beautiful small homes where we can bring these people and give them a place to live. And then finally, the military. If you're a homeowner in Hawaii, there's two more finallys, actually. Actually, there's three. The military in Hawaii offers its personnel a stipend. There's not enough military housing on the bases. We all know this. If you're a homeowner and you want to rent your ADU or you want to rent a house, who's your most desired client? It's a military family. Why? Because they get a stipend and they're guaranteed going to pay their rent. The problem is their stipend is a couple of $1,000s above the going rate of rentals in that neighborhood. So as soon as they move into the neighborhood, everybody's rate goes up to match the stipend because it's a competitive market. There's not enough availability. So a young family here that gets they get married, maybe they got one or two kids, they want to get their own home. Now they're competing against the federal government for a place to live. The military, their leases are coming up. The military must take the responsibility and they must build on military land, the lease land they have here, and there's a lot of it. They must build their own housing piece, and that stipend must go away so that you can have some consistency in the marketplace with regard to housing. So the cost of building and construction, I would say, I didn't mention earlier, but I would say that the Jones Act Hawaii needs an exemption for the Jones Act. It's 20%. 20% of everything that you buy is subject to the 20% cost markup because of the Jones Act. I'm not going to go into the Jones Act, but I can tell you everything that you see behind me, everything that I can see behind you, everything that's been brought to Hawaii has been brought here on a ship. Maybe a few things on an airplane, but if it was brought here on a ship, it's been subject to the Jones Act, which at the end of the day costs 20%. So you can take 20% off of everything you own, and you can say, we don't need that. We do not need that. And I'm not going to go into the Jones Act. It'll take a long time to explain it. It's just a protectionism piece, and it served its day back when the military needed its transportation piece and its secured transportation piece. But the United States does not even have the capacity to do that anymore because of the shipping industry. So there's a lot of issues, but it's another way to lower the cost. We must lower the cost, permitting, land use, taxes, regulations, fees. These are all components to a high cost of housing.
Thank you, Gary. That's a very thorough answer. I want to go back to the homelessness because Stephanie has an honest question, and you talked about getting input from the people. Are you open to meeting with local nonprofits to see the actual struggles of drug abuse and homelessness and working with them?
Yes, please. I can tell you, I've already met with them. I've already sat in the park with the homeless. I just went and sat down and let's just talk. I'm not here to tell you what, I'm here to listen. And I can tell you, Matt, that even on this call, when we talk about finding people to sit in these agencies and to bring transparency and to redirect these agencies, they come from you, the people. Even if you're listening to this Zoom call and you're thinking, wow, I could make a difference. I know something about this aspect of government. I know you need to email our campaign, and you should, on the email, you should say, I was on a Zoom call with Gary on this date. He asked us to mail in. I have some interest in this area in our society. I would like to serve the people of Hawaii. This is exactly how we're going to do it. And we will embrace the truth. Good ideas and the truth are rarely found in government. Government is the pandemic. It is not. It is not the people or the inability of the people. It is government's inability to function at any sort of level that serves the people. That is the problem. So the answer is yes, we need nonprofits sitting on these boards.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you. Stephanie's jumping up and down, so I know you answered her question well.
All right.
Gary, would you be, question, I don't know who asked it, but would you be in favor of having a lottery to help pay for education and social services?
No. Lotteries, you know, a lot of states are doing this. There is, I can tell you, there is more than enough money in the education system to transform education in Hawaii, a complete transformation. Just start with a budget. 45% of every dollar in the state's education budget goes to the administration, 45%. That should be around 20, 21%. We need decentralization. We need vouchers. We need charter schools. We need the money to follow the children, and we need parents back in the PTA. We need parents' involvement in the curriculum. This is a constitutional amendment, but this is the target. And I can tell you, I have great sense of expectation because, like I mentioned earlier, I will get to nominate 3 new directors, and we will begin to chip away at this power struggle, this power structure in the Department of Education, maintaining control. And I can tell you on the neighbor islands, they are livid about the education system in Hawaii because all of education, including what the kids eat for their lunches on Molokai, on Lanai, on Maui, in Hilo, is done by some bureaucrat in Honolulu. Think of it. The consolidation of power across this state, every other island, all of our neighbor islands in every department, they're like, why are you taking all of our ability to run our own neighborhoods, run our own cities? This is what's wrong. This must change.
Thank you, Gary. Good answer. Gary, what are your thoughts on supporting Hawaiian sovereignty? You've talked about Hawaiian homelands. What are your thoughts in that area?
It's Hawaiian sovereignty. You know, it's a hard question because every time honestly, when I speak to people who talk about sovereignty, there's 4 or 5 different groups that seem to want to speak for the Hawaii sovereignty movement. And I'm not sure how to bring clarity even in this conversation about what Hawaii sovereignty is. I believe as a general principle, government needs to get out of the way and that people should exercise their own self-government within the law. Government should create an equal and just playing field that all people would thrive, no matter what their preferences are. Those who actually have distinct Hawaii sovereignty issues in Hawaii, and they are, because Hawaii, the annexation of Hawaii was never done properly. There's tremendous amount of issues that need to be resolved. And I can tell you the primary one in my mind is that the state of Hawaii needs to exercise enough humility to account for its bad behavior. And they need to create space for people to come in and have honest conversations about what really is not working. TMT is a perfect example. The people in the Big Island, they see Mauna Kea. They see the Mauna Kea as sacred. The state decides they want to have a 30-meter telescope up there. They strike a deal. The state tells them they're going to take down a couple of telescopes and clean up the mercury in the ground, and then they break their promise. And they wonder why the people that love that mountain, they don't hold the mountain the way the stakeholders from Italy or or Japan hold that mountain. They don't see it as a paycheck. And so when they protest, the governor, in his arrogance, issues an executive order to have the people arrested on exercising their constitutional rights. And they wonder why we have these problems with sovereignty. The people of Hawaii are just like the other people. They don't trust their government. Why? The government doesn't keep its promises. People get elected saying they're going to fix all these things, but when it comes time to do it, they only address it in election year. Sovereignty in Hawaii, honestly, Matt, is a very difficult question. I have talked to a number of people, and I would say that we would reason together, and that in the governor's office, there's an open table for an honest dialogue, and there's going to be enough humility there that when common sense policies come to the fore, it will have a place to make change. And I would say, in addition to that, I haven't mentioned this earlier, but one of the distinctions that's going to happen differently in the way that people are governed in Hawaii is you will have access to your government at the department level. Right now, you go to the legislators thinking they're going to respond to your request as a citizen. They do not respond because they don't make policy. This is what I mentioned to you earlier. Because they don't make policy, they can't answer policy questions when you have a problem in society. We're going to create access at the deputy director of department level of all the agencies. So if you have an issue in a certain area, maybe you think there should be a stoplight in a certain intersection, or maybe you wonder why the sewers never get picked up, or why does only my stretch of road never get its potholes fixed? You'll be able to come to the actual person who makes the policy, rather than going to the legislators and say, hey, how come we can't have a light on my street? And the legislator says, oh, I'll get back to you. That really concerns me. I'm going to get back to you. But in reality, that legislator has no idea what you're talking about, because they're not policymakers. They allocate funds and they make law. So you'll have access to policy through the departments. That's a big change.
Thank you, Gary. Gary, we're getting short on time. We got time for maybe two more questions.
Okay.
Jody, I'm sorry, Joan, is it Jody and James both are asking about election integrity and questions about fraudulent election. What are your plans to both deal with it and looking forward how to solve that problem?
Well, quickly, dealing with it on this election turn, I would recommend take your ballot, hand carry your ballot in. You're told by the media that this is an all mail-in election. That is actually not a true statement. You can hand carry your ballot in the day of elections. And if you want to make sure that your ballot is filled out properly and it actually gets to where its destination, then hand carry it. The other thing you can do is, I have a number of friends who are actually participating in election overwatch. They're actually going down there. They've signed up. They've taken classes. They're actually election watch integrity people who are watching the counting and the assimilation of the documents of the ballots. Going forward, I mentioned to you when I first started that the governor, he actually selects the office of elections. Can you imagine this? A sitting party picks the office of elections. This must be a voted in, nonpartisan, voted in by the people. They cannot have anything to do with government. This is crazy. That's how you fix a problem going forward. And then finally, in that same process, we must have paper elections. I'm sorry. One vote, one ID, one ballot. That's how you fix the problem. This is not rocket science, folks. I can tell you, this is not difficult. This is just simply the commitment to have integrity, period.
And Gary, would you also be interested in looking back to the 2020 election and doing more investigation on fraud?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think that unless we're committed to overturning these things and going back and recounting, I don't know. I don't know how we go back at this point. These only the presidential, only those terms that are 4 and 6 years would be affected. I don't know that it makes sense to try to go back at this point. I just think going forward, we have to make it right. Was there fraud in the elections in Hawaii? Absolutely.
Mhm.
I think that's been proven by a number of very sincere people who look carefully at data and trends. I've met with a couple of them myself. It's very clear. Uh, but nationally, Hawaii's 3 electoral votes doesn't factor into the presidential race. I hate to say that, but it's actually true. The race is typically over by the time our votes are counted. This kind of a sad scenario, but it is the system that we have. So I don't know. I don't know that there's any value in it. If somebody could actually show me, yes, we should do this and this is why, then absolutely we would look at it.
Thank you, Gary. Brian wants to know what changes you could make to make Hawaii a more business-friendly state.
I'm a businessman.
That's why we're at.
Let's just start with taxes. Hawaii is the highest tax state, and you know where those taxes are applied? Small business. Taxes and regulation on small business here make it almost impossible for a small business to succeed. And then you have things that you don't think about. You have workman's comp in Hawaii. It's the only state in the nation where the burden of proving that the employee is not injured is upon the employer. We're the only state that does this. So what's the implication? The implication is no insurance carriers will come into this marketplace. And the cost of insurance for a small business person in Hawaii is far above the national average. Why? Because they're having to pay out on these workman's comp claims on a regular basis. The same thing with unemployment insurance, because you no longer have a provision where a person has to go look for a job to collect unemployment. Did you know this? It used to be that people had to look for a job to keep getting unemployment. You do not have to do that in Hawaii. You just go pick up your check. Well, who do you think underwrites that? Small business underwrites that. General excise tax, I mentioned it earlier. By the time a small businessman, and it's not a sales tax, and I'll tell you why. If you buy a product at the store, let's say you go to Safeway and you go to Long's and you buy some stuff. And at the end, you get your general excise tax and it's on there. Well, sales tax, it's on there. General excise tax, on the other hand, you pay on the gross. General excise tax is paid on the gross revenue, not on the net revenue. So if you are a business owner and let's just say that you made $100,000, you have to pay the 4.7% on the gross, even though you lost money that year. You lost money because you had contracts fall out, or maybe you had to buy a piece of equipment and you actually spent more money than you made. You still pay the general excise tax on the gross revenue, even if you lost money. These are the kinds of fees that are crushing business. Regulations and fees like this that people have no idea why businesses do not make it here. 13,000 to 15,000 businesses left Hawaii in the COVID years. They will never be back. So how do you deal with it? Fees and regulations. Government must be restrained. And I can tell you, and I didn't mention this earlier, we will shrink the size of government through retirement. In Hawaii, you have an ever-increasing government, but you have a shrinking population. Think of this dynamic. The money comes from the shrinking population, the tax base. The government is growing, the tax base is shrinking. Equation, higher taxes on the shrinking people. Who pays the taxes? The people who work. Small business pays the taxes. So you can see how everything must be reordered.
Absolutely.
Through policy.
And when people can't afford it anymore, they move away, and that's become another problem as well.
That's exactly right.
We're going to wrap up our time here. I just want to ask one last question, Gary, if you could, in 2 minutes or less. What's your first 100 days going to look like?
Great question. First thing on the agenda is we're going to set some examples about what it means to have righteous government. When I say that, I mean accountable government, transparent government, trustworthy and honest government. So what will we do? First thing we're going to do is we're going to eliminate the mandates. The first thing that we're going to do, it will be set up even while we're getting ready. The second thing we're going to do is it's kind of an interesting piece, but I believe it's the right thing to do. Many of you know that downtown, the Square House, the office where the legislative branch is, has a plywood barrier around that barrier. Have you seen that around the building? Remember, that was put up for construction. They never did any construction, by the way. If you're old enough, and I am, I remember when President Reagan told Gorbachev, take down the wall that separated East and West Berlin. Was it a big deal, really, between East and West Berlin? Actually, it wasn't. But what it meant globally was that there should not be tyranny and the people should not be separated because of government. And that wall that surrounds our Square House is going to come down, because that wall is a clear example of how the government has separated itself from its people. Where it's going to come down, and I'm a building contractor, and if you want to help me on that day, bring your boots. We're taking the wall down. Now, is it really a government piece? Not really, but it's a clear direction of where we're going as a society. And then we're going to start working on these policies about corruption. We're going to start illuminating corruption, and we're going to start making policy changes, picking every aspect of low fruit that's there, and we're going to start trimming government from the day one. Every person that retires from day one will not be replaced, and we will shrink government, we will lower fees, and we will lower taxes so that we can start to breathe again. So.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah.
What a vision. And just a nice way to close our, can you imagine theme. I think if you were listening carefully, there's a glimmer of hope. And there's a lot of hope. There's a lot of problems, but there's hope when somebody really wants to be courageous enough to tackle it. And so I thank you, and we all thank you for taking that on and standing for us all as a people. At this point, before we close, I'd like to introduce Sheila Medeiros. She is the campaign manager and has some closing comments for everybody. So Sheila, you're on.
Hello, everyone. Aloha. Thank you so much. I see a lot of people that on here that I invited personally. Thank you again for taking the time out to hear Gary's message and how he plans to govern. There's so much that he has mentioned that he has not mentioned because of time constraints, but I do encourage you all to go to his website. It's www.garycorderyforgovernor.com, and you can see everything that his policies, all the videos, all the forums, that if you want to do compare and contrast with the other candidates, you'll be able to see all of the forums. And actually, when you do see it, I will let you know, you will see clearly who is the person to govern, and that is Gary. He's very clear, he's concise, he's probably the most genuine person on the stage, on the lineup, who speaks and stands for his beliefs and his positions. He doesn't waffle, and you'll see it. So please take me up on it, go and watch those videos so that you can get informed and make a informed decision on your vote. Now that we're talking about voting, it's coming up, and a lot of you already have your ballots probably. And if not, it should be coming in the mail soon. But I do encourage all of you not to mail it in, but to walk it in if possible, or go in person and vote. That will ensure that you have your vote. It has been looked at and is properly collected. So make sure you do your due diligence in making sure your vote is casted properly. Just to let you all know what's going on. Oh yeah, look, we've got people with, yeah. So what we're doing right now, we are like 9 days until election day, and we're super excited. I get asked all the time, how is the campaign going? How do you feel, Sheila? I can tell you with confidence that I believe Gary will win. And I say that only because we're on the ground every single day. I see the social media. I see what's being said. We see the hearts of the people. We're out there reaching out to everybody on the neighbor islands and here. And we have, guess what? The power of prayer. God is in the house. He is in this campaign. We are all here because we were called to be here for such a time as this. He knew we could not allow this trajectory of craziness and insanity to continue. And he called Gary to run. And he called all of his teams individually. Every single member on his team was called to be part of this team. It is a God's campaign. And Gary is his David for such a time as this. And I truly believe that is why he's running. Also, ground game. So if you are available, if anybody here is available to help us out in the ground game, right now we're doing door-to-door knocking every single day, twice a day, all day. We're doing sign waving. If you want to get some sun, some vitamin D, come on out. We're doing sign waving. Go onto his website. You'll see what we're doing. If you want to do phone calls, text messaging, come on over. We will be so happy to put you to work. Trust me. I will love to have you on board our team. And plus, we'll get used to all of you and we'll get acquainted because we're going to need your help for the general, right? So this is a call to action. If you do one thing, please leave here and tell one more person, because that one person is going to tell another person. It's the power of numbers, right? The power in numbers. So please help us, help you, help the state. And thank you so much. Again, please walk your ballot in, vote in person, do not mail it in. And please tell your friends, go on our social media sites. We are on IG, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Share, like it, and resend or reshare. And that's all I have for you. But thank you. Come and join our team. We need your help. Let us win this. God is at the helm. We got this. Let's go.
Let's go.
All right.
Man, that's why I like Sheila, man. She just gets us running. I'd like to, before I turn it over to Gary to say the last couple of words, I do also know that campaigns are expensive and that there are going to be expenses all the way up to election day and beyond. If it is on your heart to make a donation, you can do that right on the first page of the website, right on your phone tonight. If you go to GaryCorderyForGovernor.com, just like to just encourage you to support the campaign that way as well. You know, there's many costs that I was never even aware of until I got involved in the campaign, and we need everybody's help. So again, thank you very much for that. And I will let Gary say the final words to close us out tonight.
Matt, thank you. And Sheila, thank you for your enthusiasm and confidence. I share it with absolute certainty. I feel the exact same way. So all of us should be very encouraged. And you should know, and I'm very grateful for you being on this call, because it just represents what you want is you want a governor and a government that actually listens to your voice and actually serves you, who actually hears and wants to hear. We want to hear from you. And I would say, just by way of a metaphor, each of us know if you go to a sporting event, let's just say it's a football game, the actual game and the points are scored on the field. They're not scored in the stands. This call, this run for governor is really a call for the people of Hawaii to come out of the stands back into life. We have a responsibility to enroll our family and our friends and bring them back into life, and participating in the electoral process is just part of it. It's just part of it, but it's a step. And so I just can't tell you how grateful I am for each of you for being on this call, Matt for hosting, Sheila for your participation, for Susie, for all those others that are on this call. It is a great season. This is the opportunity. People said, how can you win in an all blue state? You want to know how you win? Because everybody in the state is suffering. Everybody knows we cannot take 4 more years of this. Everyone's families are moving to the mainland. The stakes are exceedingly high. So my encouragement for you is to reach for your neighbor, reach for your cousin, your auntie, your uncle, your son, daughter, mom, dad. Reach for them, enroll them back into life. That we would take our government back, and I mean that in the purest sense, in the most loving sense. That we would walk in integrity with our self discipline, and own our own responsibilities. So thank you so much for being on this call. I love to see your faces. I'm grateful for this call, and I look forward to seeing you when we celebrate. We will celebrate on the 13th, and so stay in touch with the campaign. So Matt, thank you for all of you who participated, for your questions, for your time, for your grace. Aloha.
Thank you, everybody. Aloha.
Aloha.